Welcome back to the November Warrior Outdoors. This is Shane Parker, and we're going to be diving on into some e-scouting videos here in the coming weeks. We're going to kick it off today. First, I need to give a real big shout out to the guys at the Mobile Hunters Expo. That's going on this weekend, June 28th through the 30th, and I'll be speaking there on the 30th at 10 a.m. Look them guys up on Facebook and get all the information, or you can go to mobilehuntersexpo.com. They have a Kalamazoo, Michigan expo coming up for you northern guys. I think it's the 26th to the 28th of July, as well as a Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I think it's the first or second weekend of August. Awesome guys, do an awesome job. Look them up on Facebook or go to the website, Mobile Hunters Expo. Check them out. Awesome dudes. Appreciate their support. Let's dive on into this e-scouting right now. So today we're going to talk about Oxbows, S's, and other focal points for e-scouting. I get a lot of questions about, what am I looking for when I'm looking at e-scouting an area in hilly country, mountainous country. And oxbows draw a lot of attention, especially on rivers. Somebody sees an oxbow on a river like this one, and immediately that gets all the attention because you know how deer love to hang out in these oxbows, whether it be a good crossing point, good place for bedding in these oxbows. They just draw a lot of attention from a lot of hunters, and rightfully so. They're really good focal points for deer movement. Deer use them in a different, 100 different ways that deer use these oxbows. So river oxbows get a lot of attention, but one thing that doesn't really get as much attention when you get into hilly terrain, mountainous terrain, away from rivers and things like that, are oxbows and S's along creeks. And they work in the same sort of fashion. Here's a smaller creek drainage, creek bottom that has turned into an oxbow and an S. So these things are huge focal points for deer, and these are things that I'm looking at in areas when I'm looking at scouting. I'm looking at a place for the first time. I'm picking out those creek bottoms, those creek channels, and then I'm looking for those areas where they oxbow, where they S, where you've got a lot of secondary terrain features that are compounded together, especially if I can get steep terrain. The reason they're important to me is because they're important to a mature buck, especially. They love these areas like this where they can be efficient in contacting other deer, whether it be does or other bucks, in a confined area. And they can do that in these oxbows and these S's in these creeks because of why? Information. It's why you see a lot of sign put down in these S's and these oxbows, is because you can get a lot of information, or that buck can gain a lot of information and do it proficiently without expanding territory, without having to move a long distance. He's not having to cover a whole lot of ground. He can get in one of these oxbows and these S's, and you're getting a download of information, which is everything that is flowing into these channels, into these S's, into these oxbows. It's really an efficient area for a mature buck to lay down a lot of sign and gain a lot of information. These areas tend to be focal points for a lot of swirling wind currents, a lot of dropping thermals. He can put a lot of sign and cover a lot of territory in this small area right here, because it does compact so much of your thermal currents and so much of your wind currents that get down in here and swirl in this S and in these oxbows with that higher terrain. So it's a really efficient area, and it's a really safe area for a buck, because a lot of times these areas are higher vegetation count. A lot of times they can be shaded out, especially if they have higher terrain around them. They will kind of be shaded a little bit more. So you have a lot of opportunity in those areas for dropping thermals along with that swirling current. So a lot of these areas like this can be a real focal point, or a hub of activity for a mature buck. These are often the first places that I will drop cameras when I'm trying to just pick up a mature buck. I'm going to get down low. I'm going to do my scouting, And the areas that I'm going to focus on in that bottom are going to be the areas where you have other drainages, like micro drainages, or maybe a little small branch or two that are coming together, especially if you can get two or three that are kind of focused in on one area. And I've got a turn in that creek in that same area. I'm going to put my cameras right in there because that's going to be really, really good areas for that buck to kind of utilize those micro drainages and those little branch bottoms and areas like that, other streams, especially if they're rocky or they're kind of choke full of thick vegetation or anything that kind of conceals them. That could be an access point down to the bottom, or an egress point, a place for him to exit. And so I'm going to kind of focus on those areas and put my cameras around those areas to kind of pick up that movement, because that may be the point that he's using that thermal that's either falling or rising. He's trying to either catch it or go up with it. Um, those can be the exit and entrance points to these bottoms that he'll utilize not only at night, but even during the day. These are good points to really kind of pick out, put cameras on, scout in. These can even be really good places to hang a stand or hunt off of, um, especially if you can use that current, that thermal current that's being pulled down by that creek, to use that to hide your scent. So these can be used multiple ways, not just scouting, not just for cameras, but also to be able to hunt using that creek channel as a way to enter and exit and as a way to hide your scent. Another really cool feature that I like to kind of focus a lot of my attention on is where I see a Y in a creek, especially if you have steeper terrain that's downstream of where those two creeks or two streams meet. A lot of times when you have that pinch down, steeper terrain, it'll kind of almost create a thermal pool right there in that area. So you have the thermal currents coming with both creek channels or both stream channels, and it hits that kind of steeper terrain right there. If it's pinched down, it'll almost pool up in that area. And those are really good areas to find a lot of buck sign. A lot of mature bucks will use that as like a hub point for their travel to come through. So a lot of times you can use these as like a point that that buck is probably going to be traveling to check on this area, because it just seems to funnel everything kind of into those Y points, because you've got multiple ridge points that are kind of meeting there together, and all of that thermal current that's down in that bottom is being kind of funneled together. And a lot of times it'll pool up right there with that steeper terrain kind of meets. So I love these areas like this to work back off of, start in that area and then work out away from it, spider web away from it with your scouting, going up the ridges and up those drainages to follow that sign out of these areas and look for the direction of the sign. And you can kind of pick out maybe which direction that buck is coming from. And then you can kind of, if you drop a couple cameras in here and pick him out, which direction he's coming from, you just backdate that, walk back that sign basically back into maybe where he's bedding or where he's staging at before he drops down in that bottom. And those can be really good points to pick a buck off. So right here, we've got an S that also has a Y in it. So we've got a combination of things right here. And if I see this on a map like this, I'm going to be checking that S and where that Y meets right there. I'm going to drop cameras in there if I've got any kind of old sign. These are places that I'm going to check during the summer. And if I see old signs, say I've got rubs from the previous year that are starting to heal up or have already healed up, I'm going to check the direction. If I can determine the direction, I'm going to place those cameras in there ahead of time, knowing that more than likely the vegetation is at its peak right now. So I can drop a camera or two in those access points where I see those rubs and let them soak throughout the rest of the summer. And once I pick those bucks that are coming in there, um, eventually you can kind of gain some sort of information about how they're utilizing this area. A lot of times these bucks will work that bottom in a direction to where they're on the lower end of these S's as the day starts beginning. So uh, as you're looking at these, remember that on that lower portion where that S is kind of dumping out and maybe that creek is straightening up, that's more than likely going to be the point that that buck is going to be bedding around that area and then working back up, utilizing that thermal current that's coming down in his favor and those swirling currents that are down in this S. He's going to stay on that lower end more than likely. Just from my observation and things that I've seen, that tends to be where they try to begin their day. So as that thermal current is starting to pick up, then they're going to be working with that thermal current and working their way back against it so that that thermal current is always kind of in their favor down in that bottom. So don't just think of these as areas that those bucks will only use at night. That's when a lot of their sign is laid down in these bottoms, but they will utilize them during the day. They will cross them. They will bed down in these bottoms, especially if there's a hot doe that's somewhere down in that bottom crossing that creek channel or in one of those upper drainages or bedded up higher. So you have to always assume that at any point in time during the day, that buck could be bedded or a buck could be bedded down in that bottom. They'll find a pocket of cover behind them or rock, anything that's down there in that bottom. They'll bed near that, knowing that in that area they can gain all that information. If that doe happens to cross that creek channel above him or upstream, more than likely he'll be able to pick her off as her scent is carried to him, whether either by swirling wind or just by the thermal current that creek channel is bringing down. Now, if that creek channel is wide open and you've got a lot of sunlight hitting it, more than likely that's going to be a safe time for you to be down in that creek channel, because more than likely that buck is not going to be down in there. But as soon as that changes and that thermal starts to switch, that buck could more than likely be working his way down into that creek channel, knowing that that thermal current is going to be working in his favor. So this is a really good point to make here, to utilize that creek not only as your access point or a point of focus, but also utilize that creek if you're trying to hunt low to hide your scent or hide yourself. On the next episode, I'll kind of do a little deeper dive on the technical points of what you're looking for when you're trying to hunt low in these creeks or even use them for access to higher terrain. I've got a good friend of mine that I've hunted with for years and years and years. It kind of does this, uses these creeks, hunts right off the creek. He's had a lot of success. He's kind of taught me a lot of the things that I know, and I've kind of went from there with my camera data along creeks. And so I'll kind of do a little deeper dive into that in a future episode that's coming up. Thanks for watching this. This was initial breakdown of kind of how I do my e-scouting regarding S's, Oxbows, and Ys, things like that, how they work together. Look for the next video coming up in a couple of weeks. Again, Mobile Hunters Expo in Dalton this weekend, the 28th through the 30th of June. If you guys come out, come by, say hello. Those guys do an awesome job. I appreciate it. Appreciate everybody's support, and we'll see y'all soon.